Hi, my name is Steven and welcome back to my channel, and today I'm going to be talking to you about having high standards, pitfalls to avoid. Having high standards is a commendable trait to have in life. It's a reflection of a commitment to excellence and refusing mediocrity. Whether in your personal life, relationships, or career, having high standards is the hallmark of success and can lead you to an overall better life satisfaction. However, it is essential to strike a balance between lofty expectations and being overly demanding. To do so, you'll have to have multiple facets and understanding of having high standards. This includes having clear criteria, being flexible, and knowing the difference between standards and perfectionism. Throughout my life, I've made a conscious effort to have high standards and try to strike the right balance between realism and idealism. But it is and can be a difficult endeavor to strike that balance. It's important to know the difference between having high standards and using that as a justification for inaction, or conversely, setting low standards to make goals achievable in life. My journey throughout life has taught me the pitfalls to avoid when having high standards, and I'm eager in this video to share them with you. So in today's video, I'm going to talk about my background, pitfalls to avoid when having high standards, and my general thoughts. And before we start, be sure to like, subscribe, comment, share with your friends, hit that notification bell if you like this content. And let's go. Maintaining high standards throughout life can lead to success and personal growth, but it's essential to be aware of the pitfalls that might come along your way. As a child, I always wanted to have the best standards for myself, and I kept those high standards throughout my early 20s. I had very lofty expectations of myself and what I could accomplish during that time. And unfortunately for me, I couldn't quite meet my own high expectations, and it was a hard fall for me mentally. Because I realized the goals and dreams that I set out, I wasn't in a position to actually accomplish them. And having those goals was a form of distancing myself from what I actually could accomplish slowly over time. For example, I wanted to date only the most attractive people, but I wasn't doing the work to make myself attractive to others. Or I had high standards of what my career aspirations were, but I wasn't willing to put in the work effort. Or I didn't have the experience or expertise to pull off what I really wanted. Likewise, I also worked extremely hard for things that didn't matter during that time, and eventually led to burnout on occasion. Having high standards in life is overall a good thing, but we also have to realize when we're set up for failure due to our own high standards. Our standards must be in line with our goals and intentions in life, and consequentially provide a path to ultimately achieving the goals that we set out to do. Avoiding these pitfalls is a delicate balance between having high standards and giving you a path to achieve those standards. Strive for excellence, but also realize flexibility and self-compassion are important as well, because they are ultimately necessary for your well-being and success in life. So here are some high standard pitfalls to avoid. Number 1, don't be rigid. When striving for high standards, it's important to avoid rigidity in life. Being inflexible can limit your problem-solving creative abilities and also put you in a bad spot when it comes to adaptability in life. When you're flexible, you're more open to other ways of solving the same problem. And crucially, it encourages learning when you encounter setbacks. It's the capacity to adjust and refine your standards as you go along in life, and refine your standards in response to changing environments that you're encountering, which ultimately leads to more sustained growth and achievement. When we set high standards, it's easy to lock that in and ignore everything else. As a teen, this was my problem because I only had one set of expectations of what high standards should be in my life. This means that I was taking on other people's form of high standards and not my own. I was rigid in my understanding of what high standards should be for me. This made me miserable over time because I could not reach the high standards I set because they weren't my own. And I didn't have a path to achieve it because it was so out of reach of what I was capable of at the time. I should have been more flexible at the start and created my own high standards for what I could do. Having rigid high standards for so long, I realized in my mid-20s that I needed to back away from that. It was a high bar for myself that I set, but I couldn't accomplish what I needed to do. So only by starting to peel back the onions of what my high standards were was I able to achieve it. This meant that I had to be flexible on what success was to me. And crucially, it helped me to not stress over about it constantly. Number 2, holding others to your standards. Maintaining high standards is a personal commitment. It's crucial not to hold other people to your standards, because each individual has their own strengths and weaknesses, and we can't hold them to our own standards all the time. We have to respect the differences that each person brings into our lives, because holding others to your standards all the time creates unnecessary stress on the relationship. Instead, work with them and focus on effective communication between the two, allowing others to contribute to your life in their own way, and doing so by upholding your own high standards with a personal benchmark of excellence. This pitfall was one of the hardest for me to overcome. I wanted everyone around me to follow my high standards, and if they didn't, I would feel disappointment and resentment over time, and it would strain my friendships and dating partners during that period of time. This is a very hard pitfall for me, and I still do so every now and then. But I'm much more aware now when I'm holding others to my high standards. I try to keep in mind that everyone's differences are their own, and there's no one set of high standards for everyone. We are all different, and we shouldn't hold others to our own expectations. So as a rule now, I try not to hold others to my own personal expectations. It decreases my stress over time if I'm able to accomplish it. And crucially, that relationship with the other person will be better overall because of it. Number 3, causing burnout. Having high standards is a powerful motivator for change in life, but it's crucial to avoid burnout because you can overextend yourself and do too much work when you're trying to meet your own high standards. And this could lead to physical, mental, and emotional exhaustion. Regularly reassess your goals and standards when you have high expectations of yourself. Make sure that the progress you're making toward those high standards are sustainable in the long run. Prioritize self-care and set boundaries whenever you can. And crucially, allow yourself downtime when you have high standards or goals that you're trying to meet in life. Because the whole point of having high standards in life is to make yourself happier and have better well-being in general. It's supposed to be a source of pride and not something that leads to stress and burnout. When I tried to meet my own expectations in my early 20s, I was not having a good time of it. This was because I was trying to do too much and trying to excel in all facets of my life. I tried to work a full-time job, tutor, and start a side hustle as well. I had a vision of what I wanted to be and the high standards I wanted to have, but it all came crashing down. It was too much for me to handle, and I was definitely mediocre during that time. Looking back on it now, it was an extreme pace and workload that I was trying to accomplish. I didn't focus on the things that made an important impact in my life. I should have set standards that were more realistic to what I could actually achieve at that time. Or I could have used that time to slow down and work on myself in personal growth and development. So be aware of the mechanisms that can lead to burnout when you have high standards for yourself. Number 4, high standards as an excuse. Using high standards as an excuse to avoid personal growth is just a self-defeating mindset. Instead of pushing yourself to improve, your high standards could be making you stagnant. Because when you set unrealistic high standards, you're never going to actually achieve those. High standards in life should inspire growth and development, not hinder it. So it's important to recognize when you have high standards in life, but you're using them as a shield to prevent future growth. Because having high standards is holding yourself to an achievable goal that you want to consistently maintain. Embrace the pursuit of excellence as a catalyst instead of an obstacle. When I was younger, I thought I needed high standards because I wanted the best for myself at all times. That's because I was convinced by others that I needed the best things surrounding me at all times in life. My standards were so high that I prevented myself from improving because of it. So for example, I only wanted the best people with the highest standards in my life. But crucially, this didn't mean I improved myself, I just wanted high standards from others. And because I was looking externally for my high standards, I did not improve anything from my own end. This means I was basically offloading the work of high standards to other people. Instead of being the best person that I can, I was just waiting around for others to accept me. And I didn't realize that I wasn't working on myself to become that high standard individual. So when you have high standards, it's not an excuse to not work on yourself as well. Ideally, the high standards that you put out into the world, you also follow those high standards. So here are my general thoughts of pitfalls to avoid when having high standards. Having high standards in life is generally good, but there are bad ways to go about it. For example, when we hold others to a higher standard than what we're actually capable of. And at the end of the day, you might be unhappy because they didn't meet your high standards. So always try to look at the high standard that you have in life and adjust it to the people and context around you. Make sure that they have a realistic shot of actually hitting your high standards. In my life, I've been the happiest when I have high standards and have milestones to achieve those standards. And making sure that my high standards were aligned to what I actually want to achieve in life. Not just having them because others told me I needed high standards. And having these standards are deeply personal to each and every one of us. When you hear about other people's high standards, it doesn't mean that you need to take on those high standards for yourself. Always assess whether those high standards from others make sense to you. If it does, adapt it. If it doesn't, ignore it. Don't have high standards for things that you don't actually need them for. Because at the end of the day, you need to truly be aligned with what those standards mean to your life. So those are some of the pitfalls that I think about when I have high standards in my life. In general, it's good to have high standards in life and the goals to actually achieve on them. But if we're not balanced in this approach, those high standards could be unrealistic or we can be stagnant because of them. After having high standards in my 20s and not having it worked out, I had to pare back, those standards. And I had to really focus on what high standards meant the most for my life, and what kind of standards for myself that I could actually achieve in life. This change ultimately led me to a more balanced life in my 30s. So take a look at your own high standards and make sure that's not a pitfall in your life. So thank you for watching. Please leave a comment down below on what is one high standard that you have and why do you want to maintain it. And I'll see you next time.